The sun had not yet risen over the horizon when John was already up and about, watching over his property from the kitchen window. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee by Mary filled the room, mingling with the scent of damp earth left by the early morning. Jout! The farm in Pine Ridge, nestled amid lush vegetation, was his own little slice of paradise, built over years of hard work and dedication. As he sipped his coffee, John watched the employees beginning to arrive for another day's work. His children, Sophia and Caleb, were still asleep upstairs, enjoying the last few moments before getting ready for school. Routine was their safe harbor, with every minute of the day carefully planned so that the farm ran like clockwork. However, in recent months, that peace had been disturbed. Comments made during meetings with the neighbors grew increasingly worrisome. First, it was the disappearance of tools from the Smith farm, then the sacks of feed vanishing from Joe's warehouse, and finally, some heads of cattle disappearing from the Miller farm. A sense of unease was spreading throughout the region like a silent virus. "John, we need to beef up security," Mary remarked as she poured another cup of coffee for her husband. "I heard that Sebastian's farm was broken into last night. They took all of the new equipment he had purchased for the harvest." John sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. The worry was evident on his sun-weathered face. He had increased the number of night patrols and installed additional lights along the perimeter, but he knew it wasn't enough. The 3 dogs guarding the farm were good companions, yet none had been trained for protection. That very morning, the unexpected happened. A dusty pickup truck appeared along the dirt road leading to the farmhouse. At the wheel was Frank Marshall, an old family friend and retired detective. John hadn't seen him in years, not since Frank had moved to the big city after leaving the police force. "John, my friend," Frank exclaimed as he climbed out of the truck with a broad smile. The two embraced warmly, the decades of friendship overcoming the years and distance. Yet there was something different in Frank's expression, a blend of concern and urgency that John remembered well from Frank's active days. "I'm here because I need your help," Frank said directly as they walked out onto the porch. "Actually, I've come to propose something that could benefit us both." It was then that John noticed movement in the back seat of the truck. A pair of keen eyes was watching him through the window. It was a dark-coated Belgian Malinois with an imposing stature. The dog maintained an alert posture, as if still on duty even inside the vehicle. "This is Max," Frank introduced, gesturing toward the truck. "My patrol partner for 6 years, the best police dog I ever had the pleasure to work with. He retired from service 2 months ago, but he's still as sharp as ever." John studied the animal with curiosity. Unlike the farm dogs, Max had a penetrating, intelligent look, as if evaluating every movement around him. There was something almost human in the way he observed his surroundings. "I'm moving into an apartment in the city," Frank continued, "and I can't take him with me. Max needs space, he needs a mission. He's no ordinary dog, John. He was trained for protection and surveillance, and he has an instinct I've never seen before." The proposal took John by surprise. A retired police dog. Would he be able to adapt to life on a farm? While such doubts flitted through his mind, Max kept his eyes fixed on him, as though understanding every word of their conversation. "I know you've been facing security problems in the area," Frank added, noticing John's hesitation. "Max might be exactly what you need. He's not just a guard dog, John. He's a protector. A guardian trained to identify threats before they even materialize." Mary, who had been watching from the kitchen doorway, stepped closer with a jug of fresh coffee. Her gaze met Max's, and for a moment she felt an uncanny sense of security emanating from the animal, as if he were already there to protect them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from. We're just getting started. Max's adjustment to the farm was far more remarkable than John could have imagined. From day one, the Belgian Malinois exhibited behavior entirely distinct from the other dogs. While the other farm dogs were content, barking at visitors and napping in the shade during the day, Max maintained his own almost military routine. During daylight hours, he accompanied John on his rounds across the property, memorizing every inch of the land. His sharp eyes constantly scanned the surroundings, and his ears twitched at even the slightest suspicious sound. At night, it was as if an entirely different animal took his place. Tireless, he patrolled the farm's boundaries at regular intervals, always alert, always on guard. "This dog is different, Dad," Sophia remarked as she watched Max make his umpteenth nightly round. "It's like he's always searching for something." John silently agreed. In the 2 weeks since Max's arrival, no incidents had been recorded on the farm. The workers, initially apprehensive about the presence of a police dog, had gradually grown accustomed to his constant and disciplined watch. One particularly hot afternoon, John noticed the first change in Max's behavior. Vincent, a young man recently hired to help with the cattle, was approaching the barn when the Belgian Malinois, previously lounging near the main gate, suddenly sprang to attention. The hair along his neck bristled, and a low growl rumbled from his throat. "Easy, Max," John called, puzzled by the dog's reaction. Vincent was a quiet, always helpful fellow who had never given any cause for suspicion. Yet Max kept his eyes locked on him, scrutinizing every movement with a disquieting intensity. In the days that followed, John began to notice other odd details. Tools he always left organized in the shed were found in different spots every morning. Unfamiliar footprints appeared near the back fence, always in areas outside the reach of the security cameras. And Max, growing increasingly agitated, spent hours sniffing these spots as if trying to solve an invisible puzzle. "John, I think something's not right," Mary commented one night as they prepared for bed. "Max is different, more restless. Last night he barked at nothing for almost an hour. It must be some wild animal," John tried to reassure her, though deep down he shared her unease. The dog's behavior was shifting, and years of farm life had taught him to trust an animal's instincts. Tension reached a new level when Sophia reported hearing voices in the early morning. "They were whispers, Dad," she insisted over breakfast. "I went to the window, but all I saw was Max standing in the middle of the yard, staring fixedly toward the pasture." Determined to get to the bottom of it, John set out to investigate. He walked the entire length of the fence and found recent tire tracks near the back gate. Most intriguing, however, were the footprints, boots of a large size that didn't match any of the farm workers. During a meeting with the neighbors, concerns only grew. Mr. Anthony, the owner of the neighboring farm, reported that his radio system had been sabotaged the previous night. "Someone cut the wires," he explained, his face tense. "And it wasn't the first time. There are people studying our routines, John." That night, as John observed Max on his tireless watch, he recalled Frank Marshall's words. The retired detective had said that Max was no ordinary dog, that his training allowed him to identify threats before they materialized. Now, watching the Belgian Malinois so agitated, John wondered if he was ignoring important warning signs. The farm took on a different aspect at night. The moonlight cast surreal shadows across the property John knew so well. And amid this transformed, darkened landscape, Max continued his patrol, a silent guardian preparing for something only he seemed to sense. "There's something wrong," John murmured to himself as he watched the dog sniff intensely near the barn. "Max is trying to warn us." At 3:30 a.m., Caleb was startled awake by Max's insistent barking. A light drizzle had begun to fall on the farm. Through his bedroom window, Caleb saw the Belgian Malinois sprinting toward the forest, bordering the property, his dark coat nearly blending into the night. "Dad!" he called, pounding on his parents' bedroom door. John was already awake, hastily donning a jacket and grabbing a flashlight. "Stay with your mother and sister," he instructed as he hurried down the stairs. Outside, the rain had intensified, turning the ground into a slippery mess. John followed the direction in which he'd last seen Max vanish, the flashlight slicing through the darkness in trembling beams. The dog's barking grew fainter as it guided him through the dense vegetation. After a few minutes of walking, he found Max standing near a clearing, his snout pressed to the ground as he sniffed something with intensity. "What did you find, boy?" John murmured as he cautiously approached. Partially buried in the mud lay a piece of oil-stained fabric. Nearby, recent boot prints indicated that someone had been there not long ago. Max continued to act agitated, alternating between sniffing the ground and fixating on a particular spot among the trees. John aimed his flashlight where the dog was indicating, and his heart raced. Hanging from a low branch was a freshly cut piece of barbed wire. The next morning, over breakfast, the family discussed the events of the night. Mary served pancakes, while Sophia and Caleb recounted hearing strange sounds over the past few days. "Every time Vincent is around, Max acts different," Sophia remarked, fidgeting with her fork. "Just yesterday, when he went to retrieve the tools from the shed, Max wouldn't stop growling." John reflected on his daughter's words. It was true that the dog's behavior changed drastically in the young worker's presence. At first, he had attributed it to the animal's naturally cautious nature, but now the coincidences were piling up in a disturbing way. He decided to call Frank Marshall. The retired detective listened attentively as John recounted the recent events, especially Max's behavior around Vincent. "John, there's something you need to know about Max," Frank said after a moment of silence. During his training, he developed a special ability to identify people with suspicious intentions. It's not just instinct. He was conditioned to recognize specific behavioral patterns. "What kind of patterns?" John asked, a chill running down his spine. "People who observe too much, who ask seemingly innocent questions about routines and schedules, who show an excessive interest in strategic points around the property," Frank explained. "Max participated in dozens of police operations. He knows when someone is planning something." The conversation with Frank made John even more alert. He began to pay closer attention to Vincent, noticing small details that had previously gone unnoticed. How Vincent always seemed to be around when security issues were discussed, how he asked about the neighbors' schedules, and how he knew every detail about the farm's access points. At lunch, Mary shared another unsettling observation. "I noticed that whenever we have problems with the radio or cameras, Vincent is working near the equipment," she confided quietly as the children played in the yard. John decided to run a test. He asked Vincent to feed the cattle in a distant pasture and then released Max for his patrol. The Belgian Malinois immediately headed toward the tool shed where Vincent had been earlier. There, the dog began frantically digging near one of the walls. Beneath a thin layer of dirt, John discovered an old disposable cell phone, the kind that's impossible to trace. The device was off, but its presence, hidden away, was another suspicious element in the growing list of coincidences. That night, watching Max on his tireless patrol, John realized that the dog wasn't just a guard animal. He was a living threat detector, capable of seeing beyond appearances. Every bark, every growl, every restless behavior was a warning that could no longer be ignored. Rain began to fall again on the farm, carrying with it an oppressive feeling that something bigger was about to occur. Max suddenly halted his patrol, ears perked and body tense like a living statue in the dead of night. In the darkness, his eyes reflected a disturbing certainty. The threat was closer than they imagined. Tension on the farm reached its peak on a Wednesday afternoon. The overcast sky promised another storm, and John was trying to finish his work before the rain started. It was then he noticed something odd. Vincent hadn't shown up for work, nor had he informed anyone of his absence, something that had never happened before. John tried calling Vincent's number, but it went straight to voicemail. A quick check with the other workers revealed that no one had seen him since the previous afternoon. Max, who was accompanying John on his round, remained restless, sniffing the air continuously. "There's something different today," Mary remarked during lunch as she observed the activity from the kitchen window. "The birds seem more agitated than usual," John silently agreed. Years of living on the farm had taught him to recognize nature's signals. When animals deviated from their normal behavior, there was usually a good reason. That afternoon, while inspecting the fences along the north pasture, John found fresh tire marks near one of the most isolated spots on the property. They weren't from any of the farm's vehicles. The tread was wider, typical of large pickup. "Trucks? Sophia, did you see anyone strange around here today?" he asked his daughter when he returned home. "No, Dad, but this morning when I went to feed the horses, I saw a car parked on the main road. It looked like someone was watching the farm," she replied, frowning. Max got really agitated right then. Night fell heavily over the property, bringing with it a fierce storm. Lightning illuminated the sky in irregular bursts, casting dancing shadows in the corners of the house. Defying his usual habit of patrolling, Max stayed close to the porch, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. The main gate. It was then that the radio went dead. John tried to contact the neighbors but only found static. One by one, the security cameras began to fail, as if someone were systematically sabotaging the system. "John," Mary whispered as she came to the window, "there's some strange movement near the barn." Through the curtain of rain, John could distinguish shadowy figures moving near the barn. Max, by his side, bristled and growled continuously. The Belgian Malinois seemed to be waiting for something, as if he knew exactly what was about to happen. "Call the police," John murmured to Mary, "and get the kids into the back room." But when Mary tried to use the phone, she discovered that the line was dead. The cell phone had no signal either. Someone or something was blocking all communications on the farm. Then Max did something unexpected. Instead of attacking as a guard dog might, he silently trotted to the back of the house, as if beckoning John to follow. There, partially hidden by the vegetation, was a pickup truck that John had never seen before. "That's the truck I saw this morning," Sophia whispered, having crept down the stairs. "And look, Dad, there are two more parked by the back fence." John's heart raced. The situation was far more serious than he had imagined. These weren't simple cattle thieves. It was an organized operation planned in advance. Suddenly, all the pieces started to fit together. Vincent's probing questions about routines, his interest in the blind spots of the cameras, and the cell phone hidden in the shed. Max remained on high alert, but his behavior had changed. Now, he seemed to be waiting for instructions, as if recalling the days he worked alongside Frank Marshall. His intelligent eyes shifted between John and the areas where he had detected movement, as if trying to communicate a plan. A particularly loud thunderclap shook the house's windows, and for a brief moment, lightning illuminated the entire property. It was enough for John to see something that made his blood run cold. Among the shifting shadows on the land, he recognized a familiar silhouette. It was Vincent, and he wasn't alone. The rain continued to fall relentlessly, now serving as a natural curtain that obscured the movements of everyone involved on that tense night. Max, still at John's side, maintained the calm, measured posture of a former police dog. A guardian poised to spring into action, Max suddenly tensed, muscles coiling, and a low growl escaped his throat. John, who had grown to understand the dog's behavior over the past few months, realized the message. The intruders were closing in on the house. "Mary, take the kids to the back room," John whispered, never taking his eyes off the shifting shadows. "And keep as quiet as you can." Max remained perfectly still, his eyes tracking every movement in the dark. Suddenly, a metallic sound rang out near the tool shed. Someone was trying to force their way in. It was at that moment that Max's police training came into play. With impressive agility, the Belgian Malinois circled the side of the house, moving like a shadow among shadows. John watched, amazed, as the dog positioned himself strategically, encircling the intruders without being noticed. Years of experience in police operations had transformed Max into a master of camouflage. A flash of lightning briefly illuminated the scene. 3 men were moving near the shed, while Vincent stood by the vehicles, apparently coordinating the action via radio. The heavy rain muffled their voices, but their gestures made it clear that they were following a well-defined plan. John seized the distraction to approach the barn, where he kept his hunting shotgun. On the way, he stepped on a dry branch that snapped loudly underfoot. The sound, amplified by the tense silence of the night, alerted the intruders. That's when Max executed his first move. With a deafening bark, he emerged from the shadows, advancing toward the group. The surprise was complete. The men, caught off guard, scattered in different directions. Vincent, recognizing the dog, attempted to run toward one of the vehicles, but Max wasn't alone in his strategy. His barks had served as a signal to the other farm dogs, which now joined in, creating a barrier of sound that disoriented the intruders. The meticulously planned operation began to crumble. "Mr. Anthony," Mary heard from the window as he called out, "the radio is back on." Indeed, the neighbor had noticed the strange activity, and along with other local farmers was approaching the property. The lights of tractors and pickup trucks began to illuminate the area, revealing the extent of the criminal operation. Max, demonstrating all the expertise of his police training, had managed to corner two of the intruders against the cattle pen fence. His barks were no longer wild and threatening. They were measured and rhythmic, as if he were executing a containment protocol learned in his service days. Realizing his accomplices were trapped, Vincent made a desperate last move. He dashed toward the forest, taking advantage of the lingering darkness among the trees. But he had underestimated Max's abilities. The Belgian Malinois, anticipating his escape, had already positioned himself strategically. With surgical precision, Max intercepted Vincent before he could reach the denser vegetation. There was no chase or confrontation, just an intelligent blockade that forced the young man to retreat toward the well-lit area where the neighbors had gathered. "I never imagined that a retired dog could cause so much trouble," Vincent muttered, finally surrendering. His meticulously orchestrated plan, crafted over months of careful observation, had been completely dismantled by Max's intelligence and experience. The neighbors, now assembled on the farm, could hardly believe what they were witnessing. The group of criminals who had been terrorizing the region for months had been neutralized, not by brute force but by the ingenious strategy of a retired police dog. "How did you know?" John asked Max, who now stood guard calmly next to the subdued intruders. The Belgian Malinois simply looked back with his deep, intelligent eyes, as if to say he was only fulfilling his mission to protect his new family. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from. We're just getting started. The next morning dawned with a calm that sharply contrasted with the previous night's events. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the lingering storm clouds, John, Mary, and the neighbors gathered on the porch to listen to Frank Marshall's explanation, who had arrived as soon as he learned what had transpired. "We've suspected that group for months," Frank explained, stroking Max's head, who remained alert even after the night's events. They had been operating in several areas, always using the same method: infiltrating someone to work on the farms, studying the routines for weeks or months, and then acting during a storm when communication systems were most vulnerable. Sophia and Caleb sat on the porch steps, gazing at Max with admiration as the Belgian Malinois alternated his gaze among those present, as if absorbing every word of the conversation. "But how did Max manage to notice all of this?" Mary asked as she served coffee to everyone. Frank smiled, proud of his former partner. "Max isn't an ordinary dog. During his police training, he developed a special ability to identify suspicious behavioral patterns. He notices details that we humans often overlook. Like Vincent's persistent questions about the farm's routines," John added, beginning to understand. "Exactly," Frank confirmed. Max noticed from the start that Vincent was overly interested in certain aspects of the property, how he studied the schedules, how he roamed the blind spots of the cameras, and how he was always around when there were problems with the communication equipment. Mr. Anthony, who listened intently, added, "That explains why the attacks on the farms were so meticulously planned. They knew exactly where and when to strike." Mary then recalled another unsettling observation. "Now it makes sense why Max gets so agitated during storms. He knows those are our most vulnerable moments." Max's police training taught him not only to identify immediate threats, but also to detect preparations for future actions, Frank explained. Every bark, every restless movement was a warning he was trying to give us. The children listened, fascinated as Frank recounted the special training Max had received, how he learned to distinguish suspicious behaviors, memorize faces and scents, and understand movement patterns that signaled impending criminal activity. "That's why he was so intent on sniffing around the tool shed," Caleb recalled. "He knew something was hidden there." "The disposable cell phone," John agreed. "Max was trying to show us the evidence all along." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden movement from Max, who raised his ears and fixed his gaze on the road. Moments later, a police cruiser appeared around the curve, bringing more information about the dismantled criminal gang. "It wasn't just our region they were targeting," the arriving officer explained. "There was a larger scheme at work involving several farms across different counties. Vincent was just one piece of the puzzle." John looked at Max, who now rested quietly at his feet. It was astonishing how an animal could be so perceptive and so devoted to protecting those he considered family. Max wasn't just a guard dog, he was a guardian in every sense of the word. "You know," John said, turning to Frank, "when you brought Max here, I thought I was just taking in a retired dog needing a home. I never imagined I was gaining such a special protector." Frank smiled, watching his old friend. "Max never truly retired, John. For him, protecting isn't just a job, it's a calling. He simply found a new family to guard." Frank's words resonated on the porch as the sun climbed over the horizon, illuminating the farm that Max had defended with such intelligence and dedication. The Belgian Malinois, aware of every gaze upon him, maintained that serene and vigilant expression that spoke of his true purpose in life. In the weeks following that tumultuous night, life on the farm underwent a subtle yet significant transformation. Max's presence, once seen as just an element of security, was now recognized as fundamental to the harmony of the place. The Belgian Malinois had become more than a protector, he was an indispensable member of the family. Every morning, Max accompanied Sophia and Caleb to the bus stop, remaining alert even during the most routine moments. The children had even developed their own ritual with him. Before boarding the bus, they'd always say goodbye with a special scratch behind his ears, to which Max would respond with a calm, protective gaze. "It's amazing how he manages to be so alert yet so affectionate," Mary commented one morning, watching from the porch as Max played gently with the younger kids in the yard. The Belgian Malinois had found the perfect balance between his duty as a guardian and his role as a family companion. John, inspecting the new security cameras installed around the property, smiled as he watched the scene. "Frank was right," he said. "Max isn't just a trained dog. He has a natural gift for protection." News of the events on the Miller farm spread rapidly throughout the region, and soon Max became something of a local celebrity. Neighboring farmers would often drop by, curious to meet the dog who had single-handedly dismantled an entire criminal gang with his intelligence and keen perception. "You have no idea how lucky we are," Mr. Anthony remarked during one of the traditional afternoon coffees. "Ever since the story spread, break-ins around the region have nearly stopped. No one wants to risk encountering another Max out there." His words made sense. Max's presence created a deterrent effect that extended far beyond the boundaries of the farm. It was as if his reputation served as an invisible shield, protecting not only the Miller property, but the entire rural community. Frank Marshall, who now visited the farm more frequently, couldn't hide his pride in his former partner. During one of his visits, he shared further details about the special training Max had received. "He was part of an experimental program," Frank explained as they watched Max on his evening patrol. "The idea was to develop dogs that wouldn't just react to threats but could actually prevent them." Max stood out from the beginning because of his remarkable behavioral analysis skills. Sophia, listening intently, asked, "Is that why he could sense Vincent's true intentions before anyone else did?" "Exactly," Frank confirmed. Max was trained to identify subtle patterns of suspicious behavior. He noticed details that might have escaped even experienced professionals. As the days passed, the rhythm of life on the farm adapted to Max's unique style of protection. The workers, now carefully selected, learned to respect not only his authority but also his intelligence. It wasn't uncommon for them to consult his behavior as a barometer of trust. One afternoon, as John was organizing documents in his office, Max silently padded in and lay down at his feet, a habit he'd developed, always staying close to a family member even in the quiet moments. "So you know, buddy," John said, leaning down to stroke the dark fur of the Belgian Malinois, "you've changed more than just the security of this farm. You've taught us about trust, loyalty, and intelligence." Max raised his head, his alert eyes meeting John's. In that gaze was the depth of understanding, as if he fully grasped the meaning of those words. He was no longer just the retired police dog in need of a home. He was the guardian who had found his true calling. Outside, the sun began to set over the verdant fields of the farm. The property that once seemed vulnerable now exuded an unshakable sense of security. And at the center of this transformation stood Max, the Belgian Malinois who had proven that true protection comes not only from strength or constant vigilance, but from intelligence, dedication, and unconditional love for those one chooses to protect. Time went by, and the Miller farm became an exemplar of safety and harmony for the entire region. Stories about Max's intelligence and dedication continued to circulate, growing with every retelling and turning the Belgian Malinois into something of a local legend. On one particularly pleasant spring morning, the family organized a grand luncheon to celebrate 1 year since Max had arrived on the farm. Neighbors gradually began to arrive, each bringing not just a dish to share, but also stories and memories of the impact the dog had made on their lives. "Remember when we were so afraid to sleep at night?" recalled Mrs. Linda, the wife of Mr. Anthony, as she helped Mary set the table for lunch. "Now just knowing Max is around makes us feel safe." Max, ever attentive, moved gracefully among the guests, accepting pats and compliments with the same serene demeanor he displayed on his nightly patrols. There was something uniquely special about his bearing, a blend of vigilant authority and gentle affection that made him truly extraordinary. Sophia and Caleb had prepared a special surprise for the occasion. With Frank's help, they had compiled photos and videos from Max's first year on the farm, creating an album that documented his transformation from a retired police dog to the beloved guardian of the family. "Look at this picture," Caleb said, pointing to an image of Max on his first day at the farm. "He looked so serious and distant back then, and now—" He was interrupted by a very different Max, who came over to lick his face, eliciting laughter from everyone. During the luncheon, Frank shared a surprising revelation with the guests. "You know," he said, "when I brought Max here, I was worried he wouldn't adapt to farm life. He was always a dog of action, trained for intense situations. But something extraordinary happened. He didn't just adapt, he found his true calling." Listening to his friend's words, John reflected on how his own view of security had changed. "Max taught us that protection isn't just about brute strength or constant surveillance," he said, watching the Belgian Malinois gently play with the youngest children. "It's about intelligence, intuition, and above all, a deep love for those you protect." As the afternoon faded into a horizon painted in oranges and pinks, the farm buzzed with laughter and lively conversation. Even amid the celebrations, Max maintained his periodic patrols along the perimeter, always returning to check on his family. "He never stops doing his job, does he?" Mary observed with a smile as she watched Max return from yet another round. "His work is more than just a duty," Frank replied, his eyes gleaming with pride. "It's his life's purpose." The children organized a special game, hiding treats around the yard for Max to find, turning his instinct for search into a fun challenge. The Belgian Malinois, showcasing his impressive intelligence, found every prize with precision while keeping a vigilant eye on his surroundings. At the end of the day, as the last of the guests said their goodbyes, John gathered the family on the porch. Max, as always, took up a strategic position so he could watch over both the family and the area around the house. "Max isn't just a dog," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "He's living proof that sometimes the best things in life come in the most unexpected ways. When Frank brought him here, we thought we were just giving a home to a retired dog. Little did we know we were receiving a true guardian angel." At the sound of his name, the Belgian Malinois lifted his ears and fixed his deep, intelligent gaze on John. In that look was all the complexity of his nature, the strength of a protector, the loyalty of a friend, the wisdom of a guardian, and the unconditional love of a family member. And so, under the starry sky of Pine Ridge, the Miller farm rested in peace, protected not only by the strength and intelligence of Max, but by the special bond forged between an extraordinary dog and the family he chose to protect. The end, dear listeners. We hope the story of Max and the Miller family has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist featuring equally captivating stories about the deep bonds between humans and animals. Find it here by clicking to the left. If this story warmed your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on the video. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the depth of the ties that bind us. Share your Own special animal stories in the comments. We'd love to hear them.